according to my marker here, I'm on page 71, and that's not good. I need to quit taking so many notes from each chapter and move a little faster. Do you all agree?
Wait, what did he say?
Do you all agree?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. All right. On page 71, at the bottom of the page, it talks about school, family, community partnerships, helping children with some of their child rearing needs, probably finding people to help provide food and clothing and that kind of thing. They're probably not interested in you telling them how to raise their children. Involve families in school activities. Probably have things going on at school. You know why a lot of these parents need to come to school to see they need to see their kids in action. Often you see a side of their kids they don't see. So if they come to school, if you have a lot of things for the kids to do at school for the parents to come and watch, got you, Cherish. That then the parents get to see their kids in action at school and maybe see a different side of their children than they normally see every day. And encourage parents to read to their children. Sometimes parents go, I'm not inclined to read to my children. Okay, encourage parents to listen to listen to their children reading. Just say, have your kids come home and I'll give them reading assignments and you just listen to them read to you. Because some parents might not be very good readers. Is that okay with you if some of your parents aren't very good readers? Because they just don't read, they don't care to read, they don't want to read. So, well, they need to learn to read because we're all in this together. It's like, no, your classroom did not become the center of their universe. Did it? I'm here to help this child grow and develop, and he comes from a home where they don't read. Well, okay, we can sit around and throw stones at the non-reading parents in the world, or we can say, let's help the kids. And which do you think is a better thing to do? Is helping the kids more important than just criticizing parents? What's the answer?
Yeah.
Let me see your answers. Thank you. Yes, it is. Okay, so encourage the parents to read to their children and help them with their homework. Now you're going to embarrass some parents. Because the parents can't do it. So watch out, be careful about it. Why not just say, have a time when you have a time where the child sits down in a special place and does their homework, and you don't have to help them with it. I'll take care of that. That's my job. But at least have a place for them to do their homework and then kind of supervise them while they're doing it. And if they get stumped and say, I don't know how to do this, then here's my phone number. Have them call me. You go, I don't want to give my phone number out so parents and kids call me at night to know how to do something. Then don't send anything home for them to do. That's so hard they can't figure it out. Well, the parents ought to be helping me teach this child. Well, they're not going to be. And you better just accept that and say, there are some parents out there who can't help their children, and some parents who don't have the patience for it, and some parents who just aren't able to. So give them a break. They didn't have all the benefits in life that you had. And where you can, involve parents in decision making. My favorite thing to do with a child that I'm having trouble with is to call the parents and say, has your child said anything about school, about whether they like it or they don't like it or what? And say, well, no, not too much. Well, I seem to get the impression your child's not very happy in my classroom. Do you have any suggestions of some things I could do to have a better relationship with your child? And they go, well, you know, he does say sometimes that you, and I'm going to thank you very much. Anything else that you've observed that could help me be a better teacher? Go, well, what if they suggest something that you don't want to do? I said, well, I'll take that under consideration. Thank you for your suggestions. But my experience has been that usually when parents give me some suggestions and I implement them, it improves the relationship between me and the child. we have a better relationship, we get a lot more done. And plus, if the parents like me and their kids go home and complain about me as a teacher, the teacher goes, I talked with Mr. Bonine and he's a nice man. You just do what he tells you to do and cooperate with him. Okay. And then, where you can, coordinate with community, businesses, organizations in the community that are working with children, people who are doing things with the kids in terms of sports or churches or other things. I used to go to businesses when I had to do things like when I was going to teach a science lesson that involved some equipment. I would go to the store and I'd say to the local guy, look, I'm doing this for the kids at school. Can you give me a discount on this stuff? And he'd go, no, but he said, I guess I could donate it to you. And I said, well, I'll be sure and tell the kids you donate. He said, just don't say anything. Just take it and leave. Because, see, he felt guilty telling me no, he didn't want to give me a break. So he just gave me the stuff. But he doesn't want the whole world knowing he's giving stuff away to help with school. Because then everybody will be coming and asking for free stuff. You say, don't you feel bad making people feel bad when you're out begging for your kids? Nope, because I'm doing it for my kids. So I just keep going and sometimes know that they won't want to see me coming through the door, but that's life. I'm doing it for the kids. Page 72 talks about the supporting the achievement. And here's what the textbook says. From children from low-income families. Now, I like the suggestions. I just wish they wouldn't refer to them as children from low-income families. Why do we have to point out that these kids are coming from poor homes or that their parents have low-paying jobs? I mean, what do all these kids kind of have in common? They're low achievers, are they? So maybe talk about the low achievers in my class. You follow? Instead of doing something to, sometimes teachers, this is funny, they want to try to be very sensitive to the students, but they're not very sensitive to the parents. That's why I quit eating lunch in the teacher's workroom, because I got tired of the conversations of teachers, that the way they talk about parents. I just thought that is not healthy. And even the way they talked about the kids at school, I just thought, I just don't want to be in this environment. And so I didn't want to sound like I was being judgmental or holier than thou. So I just said, I think I'll eat in the cafeteria with the kids where I can get to know them better. And they thought, he's strange. And you go, well, isn't that a lie? I said, no, I really do want to eat with the kids to get to know them better. That just wasn't what drove me out of the teacher's workroom. But I'm not going to tell you that the way you sit in here and badmouth all the parents bothers me. So I just move on down the road. And what do I do to help kids? I stay after school and do one-to-one tutoring. I come in before school and do one-to-one tutoring. Because I want to help them learn this stuff. Sometimes I'll ask a student in class that's really good at something if they would like to help somebody who's struggling. You want them to read and they don't have books at home? Give them books to read during the summer. Let them take some books home. Pass them around. They do say something here that I think is important to mention on page 72. Low achievement by low-class children. Oh, I hate reading those words. But that's what he says, so I'm just quoting him. Low achievement by lower-class children is not inevitable. There are people who actually are teachers who actually believe that these lower-class children are never going to amount to anything. And I personally take offense at calling them lower-class children. They come from low-income families, okay? They're disadvantaged in many ways. They don't have all the benefits that other people have. But I just think we ought to be careful about the words we use to describe these folks. Page 73 says develop positive relationship with the parents. So change the way you talk with them and to them. And the first thing on the list on page 73 is making home visits. Do you think you'll enjoy making home visits when you start teaching? Yes
Probably with some
or
of them.
no?
Probably with some of them.
It depends on it. It could be both.
So yes, okay,
Yes
there.
and no.
I thought someone would do that today. They go yes and no, yes and no, yes and no. All right. Did everybody hold up a card? All right. Are you going to enjoy making home visits? Okay. Am I going to enjoy making home visits? No. Do I enjoy what I gain in terms of insight into my children from making home visits? Yes. So I'm going to make the home visit. What else do they say? Where'd it go? Home visits, newsletters, sending information home to tell the parents what's going on at school. What are we learning? What are we going to be learning? What's happening at school? What kind of stuff's coming up? Did any of you get newsletters at your house from your teachers telling you what was happening? Yes or no? Yes, yes. No, 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 no.
Every week.
Whoa. Okay. You got them every week?
From all of my elementary teachers, there was always a newsletter at the end of the week.
Where did she go to school?
A small public school.
A small public school where the parents were an important part of what was going on. You said yes, your parents got little newsletters?
Mm-hmm.
Where'd you go to school?
Kind of a large elementary school.
A large elementary school. So even a big school can send stuff home like that. Well, if you never got anything in the mail, and then you don't know how much those families benefited from it, but you need to make a note, say, I'm going to do that. I'm going to keep my parents informed. I mean, isn't that kind of easy today with emails and stuff? Or if it's not? Can you just, over the weekend, type something up and then on Monday, type up what you're kind of going to be doing this week and then print it out and have all the children take it home and give it to their parents? Just so they know what's happening at school and what kind of stuff's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
The parents actually really appreciate that because they'll ask their kids, "What you learned in school today?" And a lot of the times the kids are like, "I don't know."
Yeah, nothing.
It'll give them something to talk about.
And then they say, well, what about this thing we got from you that said that your teacher sent us that said you were doing this? I'm going to invite parents to come to my classroom. Yes, I am. What are the rest of you going to do? Yes. What are you going to do? Yes. Invite parents to come to my classroom. Anna Lee, what are we going to do? Oh, there's the little card. So everybody says yes to that. I'm going to enjoy having parents in my classroom and it won't bother me at all. No. I'm going to be a little uncomfortable with the parents there, but I'm going to invite them anyway because it's important and it's helpful. And you'll learn a lot from it. We're on page 73, talking about developing relationships with parents. I'm going to ask parents to come to school and share things regarding their expertise, their interests, their hobbies, their occupations. Yes, yes. Good for you. Good for you. I'm going to make phone calls, positive phone calls to parents. Oh, wait a minute. Before I do that, did you have teachers who during the first 2 weeks of school called your parents and told them what a good person you were? No. No.
I don't think so.
No. No. Well, guess what? Years ago, when I taught this class, I found out that had never happened. And I don't know where I picked it up. Probably read it someplace. But I said, well, let me tell you something. During the first 2 weeks of school, I take all of my students and I find something good they're doing. And then like the first day, if I had like 100 students total, so that meant 10 days, 10 each night for 2 weeks. So I would just each day watch for 10 people doing something that I could say, aha, I can call their parents about that. And then I would call and I would say, let's see, what would I say? I would say, oh, Mrs. Norris, I just love having Anna Lee in my class. She just contributes so much on a regular basis.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm her math teacher. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Click, because I have to make 10 phone calls, so I'm ready to call the other one. I'm not calling to visit. I just call and say something nice and then hang up and go on my way. And one of my students, one of the graduates here at Calvary, went to work at a school here in town after she graduated years ago. And she thought that that was such a cool idea that she wrote down to do it. And this was a teacher in a small Christian school, had like 15 students. So that meant during the first week, she only needed to make 3 phone calls each night. And the first week of school, she called all the parents and said something nice about the kids. The kids were so responsive to that, that the next week, she decided to do it again. The idea behind it is, I don't want the first phone call the parent gets from me to be something negative about a problem. I would rather have some positive contact with them up front. So I'll call them first. And she did it again the second week. And the parents were so impressed that they told the school administrator what this new teacher was doing. This was her first year of teaching, and they had never had any teacher in their entire child's life ever do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the administrator was so impressed that he made it mandatory for all the teachers to call the parents and say something positive about the kids.
That's funny.
Isn't that cool that she could have that kind of impact as a brand new first year teacher in a Christian school here in the community? And I just thought, good for her. But I'm just telling you, this is like you say, but okay, how many of you like to make phone calls? No.
I don't mind.
No.
If there's if it's
See,
just a conversation.
okay, I used to make phone calls for a living when I sold insurance. So I enjoy picking up the phone and punching buttons because I know what can happen. But see, when I see all of you say no, what that really means, now do you see where? I think it's just part of the personality of a teacher. I just think that's why most teachers don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it made such a big difference when this one teacher did it.
Yep.
And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of teachers going, oh no, now I have to go home at night and make 3 phone calls a night. But I mean, what's it take? I'm not going to have a long visit. I'm just going to think up something. I'm going to make a note of something good, commendable the child did during the day, and I call the parents and tell them what they did. And I do that about once a week. And I'm here to tell you, it'll make a difference in the way the kids behave in your classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's in the book too. I often haven't seen that in textbooks. I told you I love this book. Positive Calls to Parents. Hearing good news about their child is powerful. And make family members your partners. One time a parent called and said, you know what my son told me that you said today in class?
That'll put fear in your heart.
And I said, no, what did he tell you? And she told me, I said, well, that's not exactly the way I said it, but I said, this is what happened. She goes, oh, that figures. He's always getting things messed up. And I said, well, and so after we cleared the air, I said, well, tell you what, let's make an agreement. I won't believe everything your child says about what goes on at home, and you won't believe everything the child says about what goes on at school.
Oh.
And she goes, that's a good one. She said, I appreciate that. Because, you know, the same child who's taking stuff home
Bringing stuff.
brings stuff to school. You know, my parents did last night. And it's like, nah, just don't believe all that stuff. They just like to get carried away once in a while. Okay. Page 74, middle class teachers. We all said we're middle class in here the other day. Middle class teachers often have low expectations for working class and lower class students. And these low expectations can become self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yep.
I'm just telling you, he's right on there. I don't even, can you see, I don't even want to know what socioeconomic class they come from.
It doesn't matter.
And when someone says, oh, you've got so-and-so in your class, let me tell you about him. I said, I don't want to hear about him. And then sure enough, I get to class and so-and-so walks in and says, I guess you've heard about what kind of person I am. I said, nope. Someone tried to tell me and I said, I don't want to hear it. I want you to chart your own course in my class. Let's see how this plays out. It's a new year. You have a new teacher. You're a new student to me. I expect the best. Let's see where this goes. And then somebody says, oh, how come he treats you different than he does other people? Well, what did I expect of him?
The same you expected from everybody
The
else.
same thing I expected of everybody else. I wasn't putting him in a box and bothering him, so he's going to react to it. Okay. Page 75, most white Americans identify with one or more European ethnic groups. Okay. You all agree with that? Most white Americans identify with one or more European groups. The lights in the window. Can't see all your cards. Yes, 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 yes. Thank you. Okay, such as Polish. Anybody Polish in here? No.
I have no idea.
No.
I don't know.
No. Wait a minute, Tom. Yeah, I forgot. One time I went to my grandfather's house and I said, Grandpa, you want to hear a Polish joke? And he said, did you know your great-grandmother on my side of the family was Polish? No, was Polish. Oh, man. It was Poland, but he said a different word. But she was from Poland. But I said, no, I didn't know that, Grandpa. He said, well, it's true. He said, you still want to tell me your Polish joke? And I said, no, I don't think so. And that was long before I did ancestry research, where I learned all about my English and French and Polish ancestry. All right. Italian? Anybody Italian in here?
I really don't remember. Like, I'm
You don't
European,
know?
but I have no idea.
No, you don't know. Irish?
I think there's Irish and Scottish.
Let's see. One? No. One?
I think so.
No. Two?
I think so.
Greek?
Still have those in
No.
Greek.
No.
Probably.
No. Scandinavian?
No.
No.
Maybe.
No.
That might sound right. I'm not really sure.
Maybe. German? Ah, there's
Probably.
because the other day the hands went up.
Probably.
All right. Have I said yours yet? What did he leave off the list, Annabelle?
British.
British. How dare him? How dare him mention Polish, Italian, Irish, Greek, Scandinavian, and German and not British?
And British and Maltese.
What else did? That's kind of rude.
Yeah.
But he was kind of rude calling them low income people too, low class people, wasn't he? So what other country did he leave off? Jewish?
Well, it says religion, which such
What?
as right after he says the list of places, he also says and religions such as Jewish, and Catholic.
Ah, good. He didn't mention Frenchmen, Huguenots, my Huguenot ancestors that I have such warm feelings for. Okay, another thing on page 75. African Americans and Native Americans have yet to be fully accepted into mainstream U.S. society. Agree? Yes or no? Yes. I don't see your sign up. Yes, 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 no. Would some of you who say yes to that tell Emily why you say they haven't been fully accepted into mainstream U.S. society?
Because we're still talking about it.
Huh?
Partially because we're still talking about it. Like, it's still even up for debate.
Are there African Americans and Native Americans who merely because of being African American or Native American, they will be rejected for certain kinds of things in our society?
Yes, but whites are rejected just the same.
Because, and here's
Because
what
there are dividing lines there, but there are so many people fighting it
that's right.
that
And-
it's been
And
a big
here's
deal.
my position. Maybe it's because when I was in grad school, I developed a friendship with a black guy, and when we both graduated, I said, well, we're both qualified, certified to be principals in the state of Missouri. So let's both send out our applications with our picture on it and see who gets offered the most jobs in the state of Missouri.
Mm.
And who would get offered the most jobs? I would. Now, I had a friend say one time, not necessarily. In the metropolitan areas, he would be given a preference over you. Now I'm going, I think you're probably right. Because some places are trying to make up for the difference by preferring him over me. And I'm going, well, that's not fair. I said, now I know how he felt when he applied to the school in the country. You understand? That I think that the fact that people are saying we need to give those two groups of people to kind of make up for the past. And it's like, and the only way to do that is to turn the tables around and put us on the other end of that thing where we have to feel how they felt for years about being shortchanged just because of their African or Native American heritage. And that's just wrong. That's just wrong. And we probably all ought to have something happen to us in life somewhere that gives us a taste of that. Because it's a painful memory to have that happen. When I went to Westport Middle School, where 75% of the students were African American, and I started teaching middle school math, and these kids were just mean and hateful.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to the principal, maybe this isn't going to work. He said, oh, Tom, it's going to work. He said, you have to remember that the teacher that you replaced was a teacher who had come here from the central office, and she's been in this system for a long time, but she couldn't be here permanently, and we have accreditation coming up, and you have a certificate to teach math, so we want you here. And he said, you need to understand that you just walked into this classroom where the last teacher who was here was an African American woman. So who came to teach middle school math at Westport Middle School when the African American woman went back down to the central office to take care of another problem? Some freckled-faced white kid from the suburbs. And they were just as mean and hateful to me as they could be.
Mm.
Because the black lady was gone and the white freckled-faced guy was here. Do you wear a wig, Mr. Bonine? That doesn't look like real hair.
Mm.
I mean, just gave me all kinds of grief. And I'd get in my car and drive home and just almost cry sometimes. And then one Monday I went to school and everything had changed. And they were being nice to me. And I said to one of the students in the front, who was always nice to me, I said, "What's going on?" And here's what she said. She said, "They have decided that you can be their teacher.
Mm.
So they're going to quit giving you so much grief because they know it hurts."
Mm.
And I got my car that day driving home and I thought, you know what, Lord? How many times have those little black kids had some white person hurt them? And what are they doing to kind of even the score in their own little heart and mind? They're just going to inflict pain on this freckled-faced white dude with blonde hair. Just going to mess with him just to see if he'll stay here.
Mm-hmm.
And the principal said, "I want you there." And I came to school wearing a tie every day too. I dressed like the white business people they would see in stores because I wanted them to become comfortable interacting with someone who looked like the guy at the store. Well, the principal said, that's what I love about the way you come to school. He said, "You're helping these kids learn some things they need to know. But what are their attitudes towards the guys who run the store?
Mm-hmm.
What happens when they go in the store? He knows they don't have any money. He knows they're just coming to steal something, and he's just mean to them and runs them off." And so now they're taking it out on me. And I'm thinking, you know what? I mean, didn't Jesus catch a lot of grief from people who were just being mean about it? So I'm thinking, we just need to be ready to say, "Lord, if you put me there, you'll give me the grace." And by the time that semester was over, I said to Nina, you know what? I think maybe I could spend the rest of my life down here trying to help these kids break out of the inner city.
Mm.
And she said, "I can tell, Tom, you're really enjoying that. But the question is that what God wants you to do? Or does he want you back at Calvary?" See, instead of taking a sabbatical to write a book, I took a sabbatical years ago to go teach for a semester in the inner city. Because I'd never been there and I'd never taught there. And how am I going to help people learn about it if I don't do some of it?
Mm-hmm.
And it was very eye-opening and a little painful too, quite painful. Okay, so just say, hey, be sensitive to these folks. African Americans and Native Americans have yet to be fully accepted into mainstream U.S. society and have not yet attained the economic success or security that others have achieved. They haven't been able to be as economically successful or develop the kind of economic security that most white middle class people enjoy. Even if they get a job that pays them enough money where they can move out to a white middle class suburb and buy a house. Have any of you lived in an all white community where a black family moved in? And watched the way white people talk and treat the new black family that moved in?
It's awful.
Mm-hmm.
That'll make you say yes, that they're not being treated equal yet, are they? There's just an inequality that our society still hasn't gotten over. Okay, enough of that because we've got to keep moving here. All right. Turn the page. 76, page 76. What did he say on page 76? AA, L, and NA. What are AA? African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans score significantly lower on virtually every test of academic achievement. See table 4.4. What is this? Table 4.4?
It's on 76 at the very bottom.
Well, where is my stuff that I want to hand out here today? Here it is, up here in the front. Page 76 at the bottom. Okay, do you see what's going on here? Where did I write it down up here? High school graduation rates for whites and Asians, 80%. Do you see that number anywhere? For Latinos, it's 63%. Where am I getting these numbers?
I don't know. There's this table 4.4, but those numbers are not here. Oh, it's up there in the paragraph.
Yeah, under the second.
Okay, African Americans are 59% and American Indians are 53%. So you want to write those down somewhere? High school graduation rates, 80% for whites. Oh, while you're doing that, here, I'll give you something to write on. I know this isn't math class, but we're going to do a little math in here. And hopefully it won't be too stressful to anybody. Okay. What percent of the population %, of the general population in 2014 lived in poverty. 10% were white. So watch this. What's the graduation rate for whites? And 12% were Asian. So what's the graduation rate for whites and Asians?
80%.
Okay. Now, out of 100 families, out of 100 people, 20 of them don't graduate from high school. You with me? Now, out of 100 students, 10 of them come from poverty. So what does that tell you?
No. That's Asians and whites, and they broke up Asians and white people. So it's actually 22% of all live in poverty and 80% graduate. So pretty much either they live in poverty or they graduate, most likely.
But 10% of the whites graduate. No, 10% live in poverty. So here's what I'm thinking. Let's just assume that the people who live in poverty, let's make an assumption here. The people who live in poverty don't graduate from high school. Let's just assume that none of them do. So that means out of the 20% of white people who don't graduate, half of them were from poverty. The other half weren't poor, they just didn't work hard enough to graduate. You follow my thinking? You follow my math? The same with Asians. 12% of the Asians, see, that would be the same there, that because it isn't the 10 and 12 added together, because together they wouldn't make 22% of, because this is 10% of all whites.
It's 10% of the white that are in poverty, because it's the 14.8% of the general population live in poverty. Of that 14%, 10% of that 14% are white, non-Hispanic.
Okay, and 12% are Asian, yeah, and 23% are Hispanic, and 26% are American.
So this is all just directly speaking to the
out of the people who, so the people who live in poverty,
yeah,
26% of the people who live in poverty are African American, and African Americans have a graduation rate of 59% or 60%. So 40% of the kids don't graduate from high school, but look how many of the kids come from a poor background. You follow the 26? So in other words, when we're looking at these numbers, can you see we could start saying, why are the graduation rates so much lower? And it seems to be, when you look at these numbers, that the numbers for poverty kind of parallel the numbers for graduation rates. Now turn it over to the back. And here's the number of, this is single parents. Single parent families, those would be people who have children in school. And what does it say? This number varied by race and ethnicity. 22% white, 22% of all whites, 44% of all blacks, and 33% of all Hispanics. And you see how those numbers kind of match what's going on here?
Well, the 22% is just in reference to single parent families.
Yeah. See, and I'm thinking, okay, single parent families would be people who have children in school. But do you see kind of the way the numbers break down, that there's a real close correlation between the number of people that are poor? And the reason I'm pointing this out is a Harvard professor lost his job over this statistical stuff, because what he published in an article in a referee journal of all things was that this proves that African Americans and American Indians are intellectually inferior to Europeans, to people with European ancestry. And this is a man with credentials that qualifies him to work at Harvard.
That's crazy.
And I think he didn't factor in the poverty. I mean, isn't it pretty obvious? If there's one factor that adversely impacts a child's education, it's coming from a poor background, where they don't have the money for all the stuff to enrich their lives. I mean, haven't they already talked about that in this chapter before? So if poverty is a big part of it, then what percent of these non-graduating people are people who came from poverty? And I look at the numbers and I'm thinking, wow, for those African Americans and Native Americans, that explains the high rate of non-graduation from high school. Is simply that there's that many of those children who come from poverty. And do you understand what are some of the implications of coming from a poor background and that interfering with you graduating from high school?
Well, are you asking why they might not graduate high school?
Yeah, why would someone from a poor background have trouble graduating from high school?
Well, they could. In a poor background, family life is not going to be great because either parents are arguing or parents leave, and so then they want to try to make up for it. And so, like, boys might go join a gang because gang offers insurance, but you can't be in a gang and
it's like they don't have the family support. That would interfere with graduating from high school.
Which I think this is all very stereotypic blanket statement type things, because you can live in a very rich family and not have family support either, because that's true. Because the money is a focus. I don't think income definitely correlates.
To support what you just said, look what 20% of the white kids don't graduate from high school. And we don't have 20% of the white kids coming from poverty. I mean, they're coming from other places, but they're still not graduating from high school. They're coming from places where they should graduate from high school. They just don't want to. They just don't want to. They don't buy into the system, and they don't get the help they need to go ahead and graduate. But these little Hispanic kids and these Native American kids and these African American kids are just not getting what they need. And by the way, if you're going to graduate from high school, don't you have to earn so many credits?
Mm-hmm.
And do you know how often poor people move from one school district to another? Are you even aware of that? That it's just like, would that interfere with graduating from high school? Yes, it would. So you see, it's like, it's almost like when you look at this information, And here's a Harvard scholar who got himself fired for writing an article about it because he's looking at this data and he's saying it's obviously telling us something. Europeans must be smarter. And I'm thinking, no, Europeans aren't as poor, percentage-wise, as the rest of the world because poverty will interfere with your learning.
And I almost wonder if it's not necessarily just poverty, like she was saying, because poor families can still have the support, but I think it's all that comes out of poverty. Like, why are you poor? Well, you're poor because you're a single mom and you don't have a husband and you have 5 kids.
Yeah.
Or you're poor because dad lost his job, or you're poor because your parents got married young and don't have any support themselves and don't have the money or whatever. It's not necessarily because you're poor, it's the situations that make you poor.
That's
and
exactly right. And all that stuff that puts you in this bucket called poverty, all that stuff has a negative impact on graduation rates. And once you say, oh, so there's a whole bunch of stuff out there that we need to look at. And then, are there exceptions?
Always.
And it's like, there's no question that a Native American lady just got elected to, the House of Representatives from Kansas. And she came from a single parent home and got all of her education in a public school and was able to rise to where she is, although she said, and I have to say thanks to my mother, who was like a drill sergeant at our house. So that tells you something about, here's a mother who says, I don't care if we do live in poverty, we're going to learn to be successful people. We're going to learn how to work hard and go someplace. So yes, there are exceptions, but understand that so many people out there are just making generalizations that are unfounded.
And when we make generalizations, that's, especially when we verbalize those generalizations, those can and a lot of times do become self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yeah.
When we put people in a box and say, well, this is all you're ever going to amount to, there's no way they're going to, more than likely than not, they're not going to try and supersede that. They'll be like, well, if that's all, I'm not going to try to do anything better than that.
Yeah. And the tough thing is, I forget where the book mentions it here in this chapter, but I want to save it for when we come to it. But where did they say it here? Did you read the statement in it about some African American kid who decides to do well in school and goes to work and starts making straight A's? His friends in the neighborhood, his little African American friends, tell him he's doing what? He's acting white. Can you imagine being told that? And yeah, that's on page 77. Some African American students accuse their peers of acting white if they strive to achieve. So guess what you need to do? Arm yourself with a whole bunch of stories of African Americans who accomplished outstanding achievement in life. And here's the place to go. QUIA.com. You know someone named George Washington Carver? Denzel Washington? Colin Powell? Maya Angelou? Jesse Owens? Jackie Robinson? Martin Luther King Jr.? Booker T. Washington? Shirley Chisholm? Frederick Douglass? Harriet Tubman? Rosa Parks? Jerry Rice? David Dinkins? Hank Aaron's? And guess what? I went to QIA.com and I looked for famous African American achievers. So when this little girl says that my friends are saying I'm acting white, you say, well, you tell them they don't know what they're talking about. You're just the next Rosa Parks. You're the next Maya Angelou. And she goes, who are they? And I say, you don't know about them? So what do? I go to Amazon and buy a book that tells the story of these people, and I give it to her and say, this is your book to take home and read. And anytime some of your neighborhood friends say you're acting white, just look at them and say, do you know how to read? And they say, yes. Well, then read this. And don't call people who are African American high achievers like they're acting white. What you know what she could really say to her peers? You're acting stupid. Because I know some African American people who achieve great things in life. And I didn't grow up with any of these people, and I was giving you, I was going through the list just reading off names of people I know something about. Where did I learn about these? I mean, how many, do you know some things about some of these people I just read?
Mm-hmm.
Get your card. Some of the names. Do you know something about any of the names I just read? And you go, yes, 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 yes. Good. Do you see where you want to keep that information handy?
Mm-hmm.
If you're working in the inner city and you're helping those little kids. Page 80 to 89 talks about bilingual education. What's the rule for kids who don't speak English very well? It's on page 83. Don't publicly embarrass those children.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, if they say their grammar's not right, don't worry about it. Just say, I'm not going to publicly embarrass that child. Page 84 talks about multicultural education. The idea that we try to reduce prejudice. As you hear kids reflecting prejudicial thinking, look for ways that you can overcome that
Mm-hmm.
by teaching multicultural stuff in your classroom. For example, I think probably the one group today that's catching some flack are people in America who come from Arabic backgrounds.
Mm.
Or, if you're Arabic, you're probably Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, have you ever heard this? I'm a Christian because I was born in the United States of America, and America is a Christian nation. Have you ever heard that? Okay, that used to be popular in our country. We're a Christian nation, and so everyone here is a Christian. So if you're born in a Muslim country, what does that make you? A Muslim. Whether you're a practicing Muslim or a devout Muslim is irrelevant. You're born in that country, that makes you a Muslim. So what we have to understand is help people realize that. And did the Muslim culture, I mean, what do you know about the Muslims? You say, all I know is they invaded Europe and burnt down cities and libraries and stuff. Well, if that's all you know about them, then you've only been given one piece of the history of the war between the Muslims and the Catholics. But when you teach mathematics, have any of you read this anywhere? That the numeral system that we teach in our schools in America is the Hindu-Arabic system.
Mm.
You know why it's called Hindu-Arabic?
Because they came up with it.
It came from the Hindus and the Arabs of the world. Now it's like, what? Yeah, it wasn't of European origins. Now there's no question in my mind, personally, that back in the Garden of Eden, Adam was excellent at math, along with everything else. And obviously, for Noah to build an ark like he did, and to do the kind of stuff he did,
Mm-hmm.
math was very much a part of their world. But someplace along the way, we lost sight of a lot of that stuff, and what cultures protected that information and kept it alive so it could be passed on to those of us with European ancestry again? The Hindus and the Muslims. The Hindus and the Arabs. And I was taught that Hindus who worship animals and Arabs who worship Muhammad just aren't smart enough to do anything. I mean, somewhere, somebody gave me that impression. And I had to do a whole lot of research to say someone didn't know what they were talking about. Someone lied to me, or else they just weren't informed enough to know what's going on. Okay. Oh. He ends the chapter with intelligence and learning styles. And you've already talked about learning styles, and we'll talk about intelligence, how smart somebody is. Haven't all of you looked at multiple intelligences somewhere?
Somewhere.
Like, do you have more mathematical or linguistic intelligence? Have you looked at those different kinds of intelligence? Musical intelligence, artistic intelligence? Have you seen those anywhere?
Heard
You have?
them.
Long time ago.
Well, then maybe I better get a chart and bring it in here and pass it out and give it to you somewhere along the way. But I thought you kind of knew that. And I skipped over the page 86 to 88, where it talks about being sensitive about this sexuality stuff. Last night, the news media is making such a big deal about some gay person just was elected governor of some state. And I'm thinking, okay, was there any gay person who ran for office and didn't get elected? So what? I mean, why do you even mention their sexuality? That in itself, pointing up this sexual orientation, is kind of making a big deal out of what? Nothing? Except a person's choices on how they want to live sexually. And why in the world are we spending so much time talking about your sexual preferences when there are bigger things to talk about? And I know it's like, what does page 8 say? We need to be very supportive of the LGBT students. And I say, no more than being supportive of chastity, or pornography, or sodomy, or promiscuity, or pedophilia, or exhibitionism. Right? I mean, where do you stop being supportive?
Yep.
And just because some people, and I added incest to this. I mean, I started looking over the list of all of these sexual preferences people can have. And you know, don't you, that in the 1970s and before, that homosexuality was listed in the APA, the American Psychological Association, as a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only in the early 80s that they changed their mind. And back then, when I was teaching psychology here, I said to some students, the APA just changed their minds. They just said that homosexuality is no longer a mental illness. Now watch what's going to happen in our society. And here we are 40 years later with people saying, don't you dare offend someone who's got a, in the 1970s terms, a mental illness. I mean, was it really a mental illness then and it isn't now? Or is it still a mental illness, we just don't call it that anymore?
It's just like the other mental illnesses. If you have someone that has PTSD, you still have to be sensitive about it. You can't just walk up to them and say, we'll just get over it. You can go listen to fireworks on 4th of July with me.
That's
I don't
right.
care. I mean, you still have to be sensitive to them.
But we have to be sensitive to everybody, don't we? So it isn't like, well, be sensitive to these people. Well, what about the rest of the world? Well,
We've all got
and then it's like,
problems, yeah.
like, okay, I'll be sensitive to you. Are you going to be sensitive to everybody else? No, we don't have to be sensitive to anybody. And in fact, one time I thought, why are some of these people with these weird sexual orientations getting so upset about the rest of us?
If we're expected to be supportive of those with different sexual preferences that we don't necessarily agree with, then I mean, secular professors should be supportive of the Christian students.
And shouldn't that LBGT person just be just as supportive of me and my going to church and what my church believes as they want me to be supportive of them? They go, no way. I'm saying, well, guess what? It's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
And what it comes down to, okay, it's like, hey, why can I say, hey, let's live and let live, okay? You don't buy into my moral standards, I don't buy into yours, so I'm not going to be hateful to you. Why are you being hateful to me? And when I asked that question some years ago, I thought, aha, I think I know why. Why does a person who steals get mad at me for not being willing to steal?
Because they feel guilty.
If you feel guilty about what you're doing, you have a hard time being accepting of people who disagree with what you're doing. So they're not going to get this thing squared away till they get their heart right with God. Okay, enough of that. Now that finishes this chapter, so we're ready for the next one. What is the next one? Chapter 5. Whoa. Here's what I concluded. If I don't make as many pages of notes, I won't take as long. So now I only have 3 pages for this chapter. So that ought to help us get through it. Don't you think? Does that make sense? If I have fewer notes, I'll cover the material faster?
Probably.
No, it doesn't. I don't have as much material, so I'll just take off on a tangent and start talking about something. You guys don't know me very well, do you? All right. Okay, so chapter 5, Behavioral and Social Theories of Learning. Page 97. Can anyone tell me what children should do when the teacher asks a question? What should a teacher do when children ask? No. What should children do when the teacher asks a question?
Actually, they should listen.
If I ask a question, what am I hoping you'll do?
Answer it.
Okay, I'm going to do it again. When I ask a question, what am I hoping you'll do?
Think.
Think about.
When I ask a question, what am I hoping you'll
Give
do?
you an answer.
What?
You want us to give you an answer.
Is that what, does everyone agree? I want you to answer my question?
I mean, that's part of it.
Yes.
I feel like this is a
Yes,
trick
I want you to answer my question. Do you have to raise your hand and ask permission and wait to be called on to answer the question?
It depends on the classroom.
What you mean here?
In here.
Oh,
in here.
no.
In here?
No.
Well, shouldn't I conduct this room like you're going to conduct your classroom someday?
No, because
So you can learn what it's like to have to be told to, you go ahead and think up your answer, but you can't answer till you raise your hand and I look around the room and then call on somebody. Where does that stuff come from? It comes from, what's her name? Julia Esteban. Okay, did you have to raise your hand before you could answer a question in class when you were younger?
Yup.
No, yes.
Did you guys even go to school?
Yes. Listen there. What did you put up? What was yours?
Yes.
Yes.
I was homeschooled.
Can you imagine being in a classroom where the teacher asks a question and you start and you answer and you get in trouble?
Pandemonium.
Because pandemonium, she says. Now she was in a room where they had to raise their hands. Was it pandemonium for all of you who said no?
I was homeschooled, so I would talk over my siblings. My parents would yell at me, and so I would quit talking over my siblings.
So you had to raise your hand?
Well, no. You just learn to wait your turn.
Just wait your turn.
Well, and I mean, when we got to the high school classes, there's one professor that was definitely my favorite in high school. He definitely prepared me most for college. He didn't necessarily he didn't require holding to raise your hand, but I'm a talker in class, and so I like feedback. I like talking with the professor, and so he'd always have to be like, okay, anyone else other than Cherish have an answer to this next question? And so some of it is just giving opportunity for everyone to help develop the conversation.
And guess what? Guess what's one way to help everybody participate in the conversation?
Little note card.
Now, granted, the cards I'm giving you are just yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm doing this today is because of this chapter 5, where it talks about classical conditioning. And anytime you read about classical conditioning, it tells you that it most often is used in classrooms to help overcome fears, or it's used with children to overcome fears. And so I thought, what's the greatest fear any child is going to bring to the classroom for a new teacher?
Being wrong.
And it's the fear of answering questions, isn't it? Isn't that a big fear of little kids in a classroom?
Mm-hmm. That's a fear of big kids in a big.
Oh,
like,
that's fear of big kids in a
theology
classroom. I mean, because if early on you kind of get shut down or embarrassed or something, you're going, I'm not doing that. So these little cards are a mechanism for overcoming those fears or apprehensions.
Mm.
But if I really wanted to step it up a level, instead of having a card where it says yes or no on it, every one of you would have a little tablet and a little white marker, and I would ask a question, you would write your answers on there and then turn them and show them to me.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you doing? You're conditioning people to answer your questions without raising their hands and waiting their turn. Because if my purpose is to get everybody involved, then find a way to get everybody involved.
One way, in our last class that we did, Dr. Stricker would start at one end. He would ask a question that could have a simple answer, and he would start at one end and ask every single person down the line, and every person would have to contribute to the response.
Everyone has to make some kind of contribution to the conversation.
Yeah.
Yep.
And in fact, when I do that, when someone says, "Well, I agree with what Annalie said," and I'm saying, "So what did she say that you agree with?" You understand? I'm going to make people contribute.
Because when you verbalize a thought rather than just saying, "Yeah, what she said," it cements it in your brain too and helps you form opinions. And as a child, it's important to start developing that ability to make standards for you because you think that's what's right. Because as you grow up and become an adult, you have to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. You can't just be like, "Well, this is what I've always done. This is what my parents said." And because you have to get to that point of accountability, like self-accountability.
So I need to ask a question. If you've already read that little story in the little yellow box there on page 97, so do you plan to have children raise their hands and wait quietly?
It depends
In your classroom?
It depends on the classroom.
Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes? No? No? Yes? Yes? Yes?
I do both. I already teach classrooms.
So just
and I
flip
do
back and
both.
forth. Yes and no?
Yeah, I did both.
Both? No? And if you do one and it's not facilitating good learning, what will you probably do?
Switch.
Change and try something else. Until you find what works for your children and what works for what you're trying to do in terms of helping them learn things. Here's what the author says about Miss Esteban. What Miss Esteban says is less important than the actual response she makes to her students' behavior. What she says. Raise your hands and wait quietly.
That's so funny.
If you know the rule, why were you shouting out your answer before I called on you? And what's less important than the actual responses she makes to her students' behavior? What she says is less important than how she responds to what's going on in the classroom. Whoa. So what's my response to what's going on in the classroom? Oh, I got the roster here. So I ask a question. I ask people to contribute and participate. And then I pick up my pencil. Now see, I don't have to now because I got these cards and everybody's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I didn't have these, I could just put check marks by your names for today.
Mm-hmm.
And put check marks by every time someone makes a comment, I put a little mark there. And when somebody says, "What are you writing down?" I said, "When you make a contribution to our discussion, I put a mark by your name." Now, as soon as you say that, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Everybody's going to start making, somebody might say, "Will this affect my grade?" And if I say yes, then what?
Everybody.
Everybody's going to start making comments. If I say no,
Then they're
They
gonna
don't
keep doing
care.
what they're doing.
yeah, well then I
They're
don't
like,
care if
then
he
why
bites me
are-
down or
why are
not.
you
It's not
doing
going to make a difference in my grade. And you understand, different people are going to have different reactions.
Mhm.
And that's the idea. It's like, so what's my how am I responding to how students are behaving here? The purpose of this chapter is to emphasize observable behaviors. We're going to talk about observable behaviors. The ways that pleasant or unpleasant consequences change behaviors, and the ways individuals model their behavior on that of others. That's what we're going to talk about in this chapter. Pleasant and unpleasant consequences, and how people model their behavior on what other people do. Page 98. The central challenge of instruction is to help students learn information, skills, and concepts that will be useful in their lives. Is raising your hand and waiting to be called on a useful skill?
Not directly.
Oh, that's a yes or no question. Yes or no? Yes or no?
Not directly.
I'll repeat the
Yeah,
question.
thank you. That.
Is where did it go? Where did it go?
Is raising your hand.
Is raising your hand and waiting to be called on a useful skill?
Probably.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes,
Sure,
yes,
yeah.
yes, yes, no.
Hmm.
Huh.
I don't
You-
think.
No.
Do you want to hear why he says no?
I'd love to.
For high school theory of knowledge class, it was kind of like a debate setting, and so it was just the idea was somebody presents a topic and then you just go back and forth on it. I mean, it seemed to work really well, not really much tension, I guess, in the class.
And you kind of hope to run your classroom on that model.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on the age, because when they're younger, they need that structure.
That's true, yeah.
Because
Ah.
by the time you get to high school, you can kind of handle that yourself. You
They
should
have-
hope.
They have enough self-control when
Yeah.
they're older. That's why in our classroom we don't need to raise hands because we all know how to wait for the other person to finish talking. But when they're in kindergarten,
That's a skill
they're
they don't
gonna
know
talk
yet.
over everybody, and you're gonna lose control of your classroom if you don't have them sit down and raise their hands.
So it's not so much that the skill of raising your hand is useful later on.
But the
It's
principles
just that
that are
what
taught.
you're learning about self-regulation
Mhm.
will be useful later on. Ah. Does that help you understand why all of them said they're going to do
Yeah.
it? Bunch of elementary, they're going to take those little chippers and make them raise their hands.
I'm not an elementary ed major.
Teach them well.
Page 99 talks about classical conditioning. Pairing a neutral stimulus with an unconditioned stimulus, resulting in a conditioned stimulus. What is that all about? I was going to bring some candy in here
Treat us like
and,
lab rats.
and compare it with answering questions, but this guy says don't use candy. Everybody's using it, so stay away from it. So I thought,
Use
okay,
stickers.
I'll
Everybody
just
loves
use
stickers.
cards. And we'll just do yes or no with this to make, okay, now the intent of doing this was to give you a taste of how safe you can feel just holding up a card rather than have to answer out loud, and how easy it is to answer a question without it being threatening. Did we accomplish that purpose? Was it easy to answer a question without it being threatening? Ah, thank you very much. See, she's got it figured out. Yes, yes, yes. And can you see how doing something like this kind of, it's what I call, it primes the pump
And it makes it different.
For-
Variation just
for help,
yeah.
for getting things started, and everybody feels like they had something to say today, even if it was just yes or no, because I didn't have the little tablets you could, but if I had them, I wouldn't be able to read your comments. But for teaching, can you say for teaching math, I can have everybody write the answer on their slate and then hold it up and show it to me, and I can see who's missing it, and we can possibly figure out why. If you want a website to help you understand this concept of classical conditioning, It's www.verywellmind.com. Is that the one you just looked at? Verywellmind.com. www.verywellmind.com/classical conditioning. It has a very good summary, and it's very helpful in helping you understand all the. See, these behavioral theorists, they all use jargon that we don't use every day, so you kind of have to learn their language, their lingo, the jargon they're using. Okay, and then the second one we're going to do is that clock not working right?
It is.
5.
You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
You got
Okay,
this.
that's what it says. It says I got 3 minutes. Okay, the second thing we're doing in this chapter, the first was classical conditioning. The next one is operant conditioning, where you focus on behavior and consequences.
That's my favorite.
So the behavior that I was looking for was total participation. Were the consequences of using these cards pleasant or unpleasant? Using these cards, was that pleasant or unpleasant?
It's fun.
Pleasant?
Pleasant.
Pleasant? 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 We had, so we had a very pleasant experience here.
Very quite delightful.
And I didn't have to bring any, what are those called? Those little packages of
Fruit snacks?
fruit snacks?
You should bring those next.
I would love.
Should I bring those?
I love those
I mean,
things.
you'd have a happy class.
A very happy class.
Have you ever read what's in? How many of you would like to have me bring some fruit snacks for one of my other experiments here?
She does all mark
Be elaborate.
You're not sure you care for them?
For the betterment of
You know
everyone
what?
else, I mean, sure.
Maybe I should bring some fruit snacks where you can read what's in the package before you start eating them.
Yeah, no. I get it anyway.
Read the ingredients. What do you think of that idea?
already
No. Okay. All right. We'll talk about operant conditioning, and we'll get caught up here eventually. But we made some headway. We're making progress.
Can I make this back?
Do you want to keep
What?
Do you want to keep these?
Are you going?
You know what?
Yeah.
Carissa just asked, do I want you to keep
Which
these?
one?
And here's what I'm thinking. If you keep them, then it might be just a reminder of something you could do with kids someday. Because how hard is it for me to take my marker and make some more of them?
Not very hard.
I want to make this.
I thought about going to Walmart and buying a bunch of tablets and markers. Then I thought, no, just take the cheap way out. And I already had a marker
so
and some
short.
cards, so I just did that.
Did you say I don't sport?
Oh,
I don't
geez.
athlete. I don't. Thank you, Hannah. Sometimes I can make it. What is that there in front of the fire extinguisher, Carissa?
The thing
That's
that's